I did a talk recently on how you can filter your logs before sending it to a log processing system like Elastic or Splunk to reduce your costs. Because after all, what we mostly care about are the errors, not the successful returns, if you will, for HTTP, the 400s, the 500s, not the 200 response codes. I got a question back on that video asking me, hey, but how do I know the proportion of these things if I don't keep all of the data? The number of errors relative to the number of successes. And so that I have a couple of techniques for you on that today. The first one is metricizing logs. So instead of actually storing all this kind of useless log data, English is a very low compressible language. Let's turn it into numbers. So let's just store each of the counts for each of the response codes over that period and shove that instead. And that actually is more analyzable, because is it easier for you to understand that you had 1% errors today versus 0.1% yesterday, or to dig around and look at 100,000 log records today versus 100,000 yesterday? Clearly the first. So metricizing logs is a good technique. It's not complete though, because it doesn't answer the problems of latency distributions. So what you get out of the 200 response code is you also find out how long the request took. So what you can do in order to metricize that is to create buckets. So you basically create buckets and say, this one took between, let's say, less than a second, 1 to 10 seconds, 10 to 100 seconds, 100 to 1,000 seconds, more than 1,000 seconds. Generally, you want to do this in a log way rather than the linear way. I personally don't like that approach because the buckets are arbitrary. So what I prefer is to actually make sure that the number of requests times the time that they took are the same in each of the buckets, and then automatically define the thing that way. That comes out of my experience in databases where you can have a lot of really short requests and some really long ones, but some 1 hour database query is worth 100 millisecond queries. And they're equally valuable in reduction. So if if you have those buckets, suddenly you know that shifting things one bucket to the left saves you about the same amount of time, whether it's something like introducing a result set cache for your fast queries or introducing an algorithmic change for your slow queries. And so I think that becomes super powerful, not just for databases, but for everything, where you can now understand what your system's actually doing and where the costs are. Like you might have a spike due to a network thing causing you to have to do a retry and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a good technique. Think about it. Talk to me in the comments. It's a super complicated topic, but I think that there's a lot that we can do here without having to keep billions of log records that actually are kind of data free beyond these tiny buckets that we can actually analyze.